My name is Nathan White. I am a health and wellness consultant with Everactive Schools. I am my role is I go around Alberta, work with schools, work on their comprehensive school health, facilitate grant funding, and my kind of expertise with the curriculum comes from I had the whole summer to dive into it. So I'm more than happy to share kind of some tips and tricks with you all, and some things that I noticed and some things that you can use. And also just talk about what assessment can look like within this curriculum. So a little bit about the folks that are bringing you this session. Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia were the ones that organized this. They're the ones that brought us together, and this is with support from Healthy Schools Lab, which is the University of Alberta, focusing on healthy school and communities, and Everactive Schools, which is who I work for, and we also promote comprehensive school health in Alberta. So a little bit about my background. I taught phys ed and a myriad of other subjects. I pretty much throughout my teaching career taught half phys ed and half academic, and because of that really got to engage with a lot of different curricula, and it really had kind of caused me to reflect on ways that we can kind of take assessment and how it looks in phys ed, apply it in the classroom, and vice versa. So excited to share some of that knowledge with you all. So it looks like we have folks from pretty much Treaty 6 and Treaty 7. I actually happen to be coming to you from Treaty 8 today. I'm up in Fort McMurray. And just want to take the time to acknowledge that we are on treaty territory, and that I'm very lucky in my job to work with lots of Indigenous folks, to learn about their wisdom and the knowledge that they've kept for time immemorial. I do acknowledge that the land that we're on today came at great sacrifice, and that it was inhabited before my ancestors came here, and I'm grateful for this land. And I acknowledge that Indigenous folks are still here and that they are thriving, and that they have lots of knowledge to share. One thing that I've picked up from communities is respecting the land and always giving back to the land when you take something from it. So I am grateful for that, and acknowledge that this is the traditional homeland of the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, the Métis regions, and many other groups as well. So let's talk about this session. We're going to fast forward through some stuff since we're a bit shorter on time. But we are going to talk about the framework of the new phys ed and wellness curriculum. We're going to go through that a bit quicker since we started a bit later. My apologies for that. We're going to talk about some of the learning outcomes associated with the new curriculum. I'm actually going to get you all to break down a outcome of your choosing using a model that we talk about. And then I'm going to give you the tools to create a rubric out of that outcome that you select. So really exciting stuff that you can apply and share with folks in your school who are teaching this curriculum. The new curriculum is basically a combination of what used to be the phys ed curriculum and the health curriculum. They've effectively come together as one, as you probably already know. And we have 8 organizing ideas, some that deal with physical education, some that deal with wellness, and they've all come together in one curriculum. And we see that it's these two components that kind of create that divide, right? We have the physical education components and the wellness education components. Physical education components being more talking about how kids move their body, the benefits of physical activity, and wellness being more what was previously in the health curriculum, learning about social emotional wellness, growth and development, healthy relationships, things like that. But what's cool is how we can build on a lot of the wellness outcomes within phys ed. And honestly, as physical educators, our whole careers, we've been achieving a lot of these wellness outcomes in our phys ed classroom. So there's a lot of crossover there, and a lot of opportunities to collaborate with the teacher who's teaching that wellness to draw connections between the wellness outcomes and the phys ed outcomes. So we're not going to dive too deeply into the framework, just so we can dive into the assessment piece quicker. But we know that there are organizing ideas, your big pictures in the curriculum. We have phys ed ones and wellness ones. We have guiding questions and learning outcomes, which are closely tied. The guiding questions are really just learning outcomes in question form in a lot of ways. They just kind of frame the learning outcomes differently. And they're meant to be questions that kind of set the direction of learning, and they're a good starting point for our assessment. With the guiding questions of the curriculum, I like to think it from an assessment perspective, from like just kind of like a holistic assessment perspective. What would my students say if I asked them this question, right? And it's actually a good way to informally assess, is to kind of just ask students these questions straight out of the curriculum. It's interesting to hear the answers you get, and it's a good way to formatively assess. And our learning outcomes are what we're mandated to teach, and they're what our students are required to know, understand, and demonstrate. And we're going to talk about how to work those pieces into a rubric later in the session here. We also have our CUSPs, as they are called, knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. And these are kind of the pieces of the curriculum underneath the learning outcomes. It's funny, I spent my whole summer diving into this curriculum. And then I remember I was in a curriculum meeting in our organization, and I kept hearing people talk about CUSPs. And I'm like, what is a CUSP? Like, I've been studying this curriculum, what's a CUSP? And I figured out it was an acronym for knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. But you know, us teachers, we love our acronyms. So that's what it is. If you do hear people talking about CUSPs, it's usually in relation to the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. And I like to think about these as a roadmap to our learning outcomes. And they give us lots of really good ideas for assessment, both lower level assessment and higher level assessment of lower level thinking and higher level thinking. And when we talk about these CUSPs, our knowledge is kind of our most basic understanding, what exists in the brain, kind of knowledge, raw knowledge. Understanding is the application of that knowledge. Skills and procedures are the actual demonstration and proof that the student knows and understands. Progressions, we're going to dive into this as I give a quick tour of the website in a sec, but these are not actually, we're not mandated to report on these assessment wise, but these do come from Alberta Education, and these are kind of our big picture outcomes across all curricula. So this is basically the glue that ties together everything in a cross-curricular way. So your competency progressions are kind of your life skills. Your literacy is your, you know, literacy and numeracy. Your educators, I don't need to explain what literacy and numeracy are, but there are, the Alberta government has given literacy and numeracy suggestions across all curricula. We're going to look at that specifically on the website as we dive into it. Because these progressions are kind of hidden in the website, and I hope to kind of show you where they are. They give really good ideas for cross-curricular applications of the curriculum. So we're going to hop into the website. I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute tour, maybe try and show you some things that you didn't notice before, or some tips and tricks that I learned as I took a deep dive this summer. So I invite you to open up the website and follow along. And you'll also be using this website to select an outcome that you're going to be breaking down today as we go through our activity. Knows and understands. Progressions, we're going to dive into this as I give a quick tour of the website in a sec, but these are not actually, we're not mandated to report on these assessment wise, but these do come from Alberta Education, and these are kind of our big picture outcomes across all curricula. So this is basically the glue that ties together everything in a cross-curricular way. So your competency progressions are kind of your life skills. Your literacy is your, you know, literacy and numeracy. Your educators, I don't need to explain what literacy and numeracy are, but there are, the Alberta government has given literacy and numeracy suggestions across all curricula. We're going to look at that specifically on the website as we dive into it. Because these progressions are kind of hidden in the website, and I hope to kind of show you where they are. They give really good ideas for cross-curricular applications of the curriculum. So we're going to hop into the website. I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute tour, maybe try and show you some things that you didn't notice before, or some tips and tricks that I learned as I took a deep dive this summer. So I invite you to open up the website and follow along. And you'll also be using this website to select an outcome that you're going to be breaking down today as we go through our activity. So there's a QR code there for you. I'm going to put this link into chat as well. Give me a moment. So I'm going to put the link in chat. to everyone. Boom, there you go. So there is the link. And then, great. So here you can see on my screen, I'm on the Learn Alberta website here. We are going to hop into the Alberta's kindergarten grade to grade 6 curriculum right there. That will take us here. So here we have all of our subjects. For those of you that are generalists, you will be familiar with probably the other curricula as well. What's nice is the curricula follows the same pattern across all subject levels as far as how it's structured. With that being said, there is a serious differentiation in physical education and wellness that it's not the other curriculums I find to be more linear. Physical education and wellness, it would not be best practice in my opinion to teach it in a linear order, because you'd be ripping through your phys ed outcomes at the beginning of the year and not having that physical activity consistently, which we know is important. So here we have our phys ed and wellness curriculum. So here it is. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that I just try and share with all teachers that I do any curriculum session with. So we have here, the first thing I'm going to point out is if you're a person who enjoys learning like from a physical piece of paper and you want to print, I'll give you some tips around printing this curriculum. Because the first time I printed it, I was a bit overwhelmed, but I will show you a tip to make it more digestible. So I do recommend printing the subject introduction, as it is our front matter and will contextualize the whole curriculum. Which components, you just basically choose which of these components you want. Probably you want the whole curriculum. Which grades, this is where my tip comes in. Basically what you want to do is select one grade to print. That is my recommendation. When I first started diving in this curriculum, I printed all 7 at once, all 7 levels. And the PDF that came out, I found to be a little bit difficult to interpret. When you print one grade at a time, I find it to be much more digestible. Even if you are teaching multiple grades, I still recommend just checking one at a time and printing them off. So let's take a look at the website now, and I'm going to show you some tricks with the website. Here we have grade 5, grade 6, our guiding question, our learning outcome, our knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. And we see we have one learning outcome and multiple knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. So even though we're really officially reporting on the learning outcome, our knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures are still part of the curriculum. They're still expected to be taught. So that's important to know. And they act as kind of a roadmap to our learning outcome. The trick I'm going to show you here that's really important is that when you hover your mouse over a learning outcome, you're going to get a little eye right there. This eye is very, very, very important. It's going to take us to the back end of the curriculum. It's going to give us all of our cusps or knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures for the outcome, which is good to have just kind of in one place. But even more importantly, it's going to give us these 4 tabs here. We have resources, competency progressions, literacy progressions, and numeracy progressions. I mentioned these progressions earlier. These are kind of our cross-curricular pieces. And these are our big picture curriculum that transcends all curricula. And gives us ideas for how we can promote literacy and numeracy in a subject like phys ed, for example. So we know cross-curricular is big. We know that there's a big push to have cross-curricular content. These will give you ideas. So that's just my quick little website tour for you. I mean, there's more little things, but we'll move on there. Those are little tips and tricks that I found to be tremendously helpful and things that you can take back to your staff and show them for ideas for wellness or physical education activities and resources. So this is the model that I have found to be very helpful. Here's the thing is that, you know, you're all educators. You all know how to assess. So we're not going to sit here and explain to you how to assess. We're going to look at what assessment looks like within these learning outcomes. And I found this was a model. This model comes from Joey Fife. He is a very, very competent, he's an awesome physical educator from out east. He runs a website called thephysicaleducator.com. Highly recommend checking it out. It has lots of good resources and ideas for you. But he kind of showed this model as a good way to break down learning outcomes. What I want you to do right now, I'll give you a minute or two. I want you to go into the curriculum and I want you to pick out, and you can even write it out on a piece of paper in front of you as we break it down. I want you to pick a learning outcome that's relevant to you or to your school community. And we're going to kind of break it down as we go along here. So pick a learning outcome that's relevant to you that we can break down and kind of give you a model for how you could break down these learning outcomes. There's a few things when I did this that really stood out to me in this curriculum as I kind of broke down a bunch of different learning outcomes. There's some things that really stood out to me that are consistent in this curriculum and things that you can point out to folks that are teaching phys ed and wellness in your buildings. So essentially, you don't need to start doing the cube model yet. We're going to go through some exemplars. But something you can do to help break down learning outcomes is circling the action statement, what we want our students to do, the verb essentially, what the content we are teaching is, and the box is kind of the context in which they are learning this. The E is to examine for clarification. This step isn't as important as the first three. The examine for clarification is basically putting next to the learning outcome, for example, and giving sample activities. Okay. So let's see what this looks like. So this cube model is something that you can take with you today to help you break down outcomes, and I found it to be particularly effective within this curriculum. So we'll start with kindergarten. Another thing too, if you have a teacher who's teaching this curriculum who feels overwhelmed, and to be fair, like a new curriculum is a lot, and it's hard work to implement a new curriculum. It's not it's understanding if there's teachers that feel overwhelmed and things like that. I know as I was going through it this summer, there's a lot of content, but a good way to kind of simplify it and kind of make it feel less intimidating is on this one page, we have all of the learning outcomes within kindergarten right in front of us right now. So that is that can be comforting to know, hey, these are our learning outcomes, right? We don't have a bajillion of them. Yeah, we have knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures that are associated with each outcome, but those are more of a roadmap to help us achieve these outcomes. And they give us really good ideas for assessment. They give us really good ideas for how to teach this, how to give context, how to give ideas. So that's good, but this helps us kind of see the big picture of this grade level. So let's say we wanted to break down an outcome within the kindergarten curriculum. So you can start to do this with your own outcomes now, and you can kind of modify and tweak as we go. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to circle the action statement. So here in particular, we have examine. One thing you'll notice with the action words in this curriculum is that they are very broad in the outcomes. Children examine, and this is very common in a lot of curriculum, to examine, right? This is kind of broad. What does it mean to examine? Well, it's going to depend on a lot of things. It's going to depend on context, and it's going to depend on kind of the content that we teach as well. But examine is very much, you'll find most of the action words in this curriculum, in the outcomes, are very broad and very kind of exploratory, where we're trying to get students to explore these ideas and kind of build a connection to them. So here for this one, we've circled examine, that's our action word. The content is healthy relationships. That's the content that we're teaching. We're teaching them about what a healthy relationship is. And learning and playing environments is where that's going to be occurring. So this kind of just helps us get a specific picture of what this outcome should look like, and the content that we have to teach. And what's nice about the content is a lot of the content is laid out within those knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. So once we've done this, where we've circled and we've underlined and we've boxed, we have our action, we have our content, we have our context. This can then help us plan a block of content that we're teaching. So here's how this might look, right? And I like to think of it as really progressing into higher level learning as we progress through a block of content. So our action statement is to examine. Our content is healthy relationships, and our learning context is learning and playing environments. So we examine healthy relationships. That's kind of our knowledge. Does a student know what a healthy relationship is? And you kind of go through that content, however that is, and you're trying to just build that knowledge. And then you're going to do, and this is following our knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. You're then going to get them to, or give them opportunities to examine how healthy relationships can be built within the classroom. So now kind of applying their context to what they're doing. So they learned about it. Now they're taking what they learned about and applying it to their classroom and to their play with others, and having them reflect and kind of think about how they play with others. What makes them happy when they play with others? What makes them sad? Things like that. What makes them happy, like with how they're treated, things like that. And then they can start to examine healthy relationships within their own learning and playing environment. So block 2 might be looking at how we play with each other in like a broad way. And then block 3, you can start to apply it to them personally in their own context. How that looks like is going to be, up to the educator, but this is a way that you could kind of progress this content based on the outcome. Great. So let's move on. We're going to skip past grade 1. And we are going to go to, where's my financial literacy? Yeah, financial literacy. Okay. So grade 4, here's all outcomes for grade 4. One thing you'll notice in grade 4 is we have gained a outcome for growth and development. So I mentioned before that most organizing ideas just have one outcome. When students hit grade 4, we gain another outcome as it becomes more developmentally appropriate. So for example, in grade 4, we start to talk about puberty. So that is an outcome that is added as it's more appropriate for students to be learning about that. So that's something to keep in mind too. And maybe give a heads up to your teachers that, hey, like, just so you know, if you're teaching grade 3, you won't have an extra outcome in growth and development. If you teach grade 4, you will have an extra outcome as it's more developmentally appropriate. So financial literacy. And this is one that I know I'm not sure what it's like in your learning context, but in my experience being all over the province, doing a lot of professional development around this curriculum, I know financial literacy is one of the most, like, there's a lot of concern around it as far as how do we teach financial literacy and maintain physical activity and connect it to those outcomes. So here's a way you could break down a financial literacy outcome. Again, we see examine, which is, again, very broad and an invitation to explore and consider rather than just kind of give them facts. Examine factors that influence spending. So what the content there would be, the factors. What are the factors that influence spending? And the context is spending money in your day-to-day life. So how could we block that into content? Well, the knowledge we could create as a base could be different factors that lead to the use of currency. Then we could examine the different contexts and situations where you spend money, what affects how you spend money. And then block 3 could be demonstrating understanding of factors that is relevant to them, or that could be relevant to them, and really applying it to them personally. So we can see that we kind of go deeper and deeper as it progresses, and they're examining the whole time. We try to make sure that examine is included in all 3 blocks of our unit content. And then the context kind of evolves to be more and more complex. In block 1, we're just looking at broad factors that influence spending. And then by the time we get to block 3, it's kind of more personalized. So that's just kind of one way you can break down outcomes. This is really good if you have, if you're feeling stuck or teachers aren't quite sure what they should be getting their student to do. Starting with that verb is very powerful. And one thing that's good about this curriculum is these verbs are very exploratory and they're quite broad, but that gives the teacher a lot of autonomy and choice as far as how they do this. And also our knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures are going to give us ideas as well for how to allow students to examine those factors. So I would definitely, when you're creating your year plans or your lesson plans, encourage you to look at the verb in the learning outcome, and then look at the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures as kind of a roadmap for your students to achieve that. So this is a good way to break down the learning outcomes. And you know, the learning outcomes are quite broad. They get more specific in the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures as we go. Okay. Moving on to rubrics. So once we've broken that down, we know that assessment within phys ed is unique in that a lot of it is very observation based. And with observation based assessment, we know rubrics can be a powerful tool. I just wanted to give some ideas for once we've broken down a learning outcome into kind of, you know, you know, the knowledge that we're teaching, the actions the students are taking, and the context, ways that we can now turn that into a rubric. So a good way to design rubrics in phys ed, and that works particularly well in this curriculum, is to kind of break down what the student can do, what the student knows, and what the student understands. So we see kind of different levels of learning here, right? There's a difference between knowing and understanding. So that way our rubric contains kind of different levels of learning. And we'll look at some examples as we go here. But I'm going to give you a rubric template that can be really good, especially to share with folks, with your generalist teachers who maybe aren't as comfortable in the phys ed environment, giving them some ideas for how they could create a rubric. So we can start here as we design this. We take an outcome, and what can the student who met this outcome do? What can they do once they've achieved this outcome? What do they know? What is in their brain? And it has that knowledge sunk in? And what do they understand? Can they apply this knowledge to different situations successfully? So you can see we have different levels of learning here. The knowledge is more the kind of lower level learning, and the understanding is more the higher level learning. And the do is kind of a big picture of what the students are able to do. So let's look at a sample of what this could look like. So a way you could design a rubric is not yet, and you would put your learning outcome as it's broken down. And then you could break that learning outcome into a rubric like this, with not yet, getting there, got it, and wow. And we'll take a look at what it looks like when you have kind of your doing, your knowledge, and your understanding. But this is a very positive way to create a phys ed rubric. Not yet, getting there, got it, and wow. The not yet, it's really nice. Little things like this in rubrics can be huge for, you know, letting the student know that even if they're not achieving the outcome, that you believe that they will, right? The not yet. We'll talk more about that positive language in a moment here. So here's an example, and this is taken from phys ed curriculum. This is what this rubric could look like. So we can take the learning objective and turn it into an I can statement. And this could be good for student self-assessment, but we could also use a model like this for teacher assessment as well. So once we have it broken down, we know what the action words are. We know what the context of the outcome is, and we can kind of start to create some rubrics. So what does it look like? So let's talk about problem-solving strategies in order to cooperate and get along with others. One thing that I will point out, if your students aren't achieving the outcome and you need to circle that, I think one thing that's really important with this assessment is to let students know that you believe that they are capable of achieving that. And even within your assessment, communicating that, especially in phys ed, where we want students to, you know, have a positive association with physical activity. We want students to know that they can be well. So a little nuance here. Even though it is kind of our lowest level on the rubric, it still starts with an I can statement. With the kind of asterisk and fine print being the with help from others at the end. But we're still very positive and encouraging, and hopefully motivating by saying, I can choose and use problem-solving strategies in order to cooperate and get along with others during phys ed with help from others. The only difference between this and got it is the with help from others. We're acknowledging that they're getting there. They're not there yet, but we believe they can be. And we're still starting with that positive I can statement. And I can sometimes, right, when we go getting there, we're saying I can sometimes. Again, we're not saying they occasionally we're not focusing on what they're not doing, we're focusing on what they are doing, and maintaining that element of positivity and giving that student, letting that student know that we believe that they can improve. So what you can do is you can take those learning outcomes that you've broken down and you can create rubrics like this with the I can, um, I know, and I understand. Okay, those three things will give you kind of three different levels of learning. Okay. Um, I don't understand yet. That's another way you can really positively, in a rubric, say, yeah, the student doesn't understand, but we are going to approach that with the idea that they just don't understand it yet, that we believe that they will understand it. And that lets the student know that we're not just saying, you don't get it, too bad. We're saying, no, you just don't get it yet, you will. And having that positive belief in the student can be very powerful. So this is good. If you're working with teachers that are looking to create rubrics, the I can, I know, I understand model can be really, really good for that. Taking a learning outcome, breaking it down to what the student needs to be able to do, what the student needs to be able to know, what the student needs to be able to understand. You can also pull these directly out of the cusps as well. So that's just a kind of a sample rubric there. Again, I wish we could go over more exemplars and kind of context, but this is just a really good way to kind of start. So that was just. I wish we had more time. We did get a bit of a late start, but I just wanted to give you some ways you can look at assessment within this curriculum. One thing that I'll mention again, a rubric like this could be used for some of those outcomes that may live. I just want I wanted to give you some ways you can look at assessment within this curriculum. One thing that I'll mention again, a rubric like this could be used for some of those outcomes that may live more outside the classroom, especially in relation to wellness. We know some of those wellness outcomes are going to live more outside the classroom than in, where we're asking students to reflect on their wellness. We're asking students to think about what contributes to their wellness. So these rubrics can actually give students a really good opportunity to reflect on how they're doing as they do self-assessment. But you could also use a rubric like this for teacher assessment as well.